Video, we're going to be looking at some of the things you can do while you're actually creating your code that's going to make it a lot easier for you when you go back and look at your code and try to figure out what you were doing, what you were trying to do in your code. So one of the first things you should always try to do when you're working on creating your code in MATLAB or in any other language for that matter is to not use generic variable names, but try to pick variable names so that the variable name tells you what the value is that it's storing. Let's take a look at an example to see why this is important. So let's say we have this script over here on the left hand side. We obviously have an if structure. We're doing some things inside those if structures, so we have a computation inside the if, and then we have a display statement. Otherwise we're just displaying some stuff in the else case. All right, so from looking at that, I have no idea what this is supposed to tell me. So if, for instance, as an instructor, I was coming up and trying to give you help, maybe you have a TA or another member of your class who's trying to help you figure out why your program's not working. If you use variables like this, or other generic variables like A, B, C, or X, Y, Z, that's not really going to help you or help others help you. Let's look at a different version of this exact same code. Okay, so if we look at this one, we can actually have an idea of what this code is supposed to be doing without having anything else other than the code. So we can see that if a variable called quantity, which is obviously the number of something, is greater than or equal to 10, we're obviously getting a sale price on it, so a discount for purchasing more than 10 items, okay, which is 90% of the original price. We display that new item price. Otherwise, we just display the regular price of whatever the item is. Okay, so just by using variable names that have some meaning, we can make a whole lot of sense of what the code is supposed to be doing versus the code that we have here on the left-hand side. Another important thing that you should get into the habit of doing as you're creating your MATLAB scripts is to use comments. So what are comments? So a comment is basically just a line of code that tells someone looking at your program some information about what is going on, but it's not a line that is actually executed when MATLAB tries to run your script. Okay? So a comment allows others to view your code and understand what your code is supposed to be doing. It allows you to remember what you did. So, maybe we're off in Models 2 at the end of the semester and you're working on a project and you want to do something that you did back in Models 1. So you wrote some code in Models 1, you thought it was great, you want to use that in Models 2. Without some comments in there reminding you what exactly you were doing, it may be very difficult for you to actually remember what you did and then incorporate that into your project. Okay. So to create a comment in MATLAB, we use the % symbol. Okay. So any comments, if you're using the MATLAB environment, any comments will appear as a green color. Okay. And you can actually put comments in any place that you want as long as it's not at the beginning of an executable line. So you can create comments on their own lines, or you can place comments at the end of executable lines. If you put a comment at the beginning, then you end up with problems because then your executable line becomes part of that comment. So you'll either want to put them on their own lines or at the end of your executable lines. So at a minimum, you must have at least one comment, or like a set of comments, in your code in this class. And that's what we call the code submission header. So whenever you submit us an assignment for Engineering Models 1 or Engineering Models 2, you should have this set of comments at the beginning of your code. Okay, and there you describe what the name of the code file is, what your name is, what the date that the assignment was completed, or what the date that the assignment was due. You need to give a description for what the code is supposed to be performing, as well as how you would use it. So normally that would be tell them how to run it, give them some idea of what the inputs are, or anything that the user is going to need to know in order to be able to run the script and actually get it to perform what it's supposed to do. So here I have an example of what a code submission header might look like. Okay, so we have the name of the file is superscript. I was the one who wrote it, and it was written on Pi Day in 1592. Okay, then I have a description of what the script is supposed to do, as well as the usage. So you can see the usage, we simply would type the name of the script at the command prompt. But there are some things that you'll need to do when you're running the code. So we obviously need to enter the address of a phone booth so that our superscript can turn from regular script into Superman script. Next, another thing that's going to make it a lot easier for you to understand what your program is doing, as well as for others, is to make sure you use good formatting. So what do you mean by formatting? So make sure that you use white space judiciously. So for instance, leave some space around arithmetic operators. Make sure you're using indents. You can actually leave a couple lines blank between different sections of your code to help break it up. Okay, so that's what we mean by using white space. Okay, another kind of along the same lines as this white space idea is making sure you use proper indentation for loops and conditional statements. All right, so MATLAB automatically does some indentations. You probably want to use that indentation that MATLAB does, because it's going to make it a whole lot easier for you to figure out what kind of things go inside others. So if you have a loop and maybe you have some code that goes inside the loop, if all of the code inside the loop is indented, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to see, okay, this is the code that's inside my loop. This is especially important if you have things nested inside one another. So let's say you have an if structure inside of a loop, then you'd want to have one level of indentation for the loop, another level of indentation for the conditional structure, so you can see which code is inside the if, which code is inside the loop. It's also going to help you in terms of lining up your end statements to make sure you have an end statement, because if you don't have the end, you're going to get all kinds of MATLAB errors, and then you're going to have to try and go through all kinds of lines of code to try and figure out where you're missing that one end. Right? So make sure you use proper indentation. And last, you can also use comment lines to help break up sections of code to make it easier to locate specific parts. So I said at a minimum you should have your header section for your code. What I would also suggest is for every different section, put a comment line that says this section is supposed to do this section is supposed to do that. Okay, it's going to help you, and it's going to help others, especially graders, instructors, and TAs who need to be able to look at your code and help you figure out what's going wrong. Okay, so last, we want to talk about testing your program. Okay, so you should never assume that your program works, right? So obviously you can tell when there's a syntax error because MATLAB's going to yell at you and it's not actually going to let you run the code. It's going to give you that red error messages in the command window. Okay, but even once you get past that process of fixing all of your syntax errors, there may be other errors, and we'll talk about this in the debugging video later on. Okay, but there may be other errors within your program. So you always want to have a set of test cases that you can use to check to make sure that your program is producing the correct results and not just that it doesn't have any syntax errors and is capable of running. Okay, so this is probably part of what you should be doing when you're planning out your program, is to come up with a set of values that you know should produce a certain set of results, and then once your program is running, check to make sure that those results actually occur for those specific inputs. So that brings us to the end of this video. Hopefully you've learned some new strategies that you can employ when you're writing your own MATLAB scripts to help make them more readable both for you and for others who might be there helping you.